Hey, welcome to episode 2 of Wrestle Rock Talk. I'm Max.
I'm Flint.
So we're gonna all both and all stick with our stage names. It's much easier to deal with. Steve has been Flint for as long as actually I met you as Flint when we started the job together that we met on.
Yes.
So we're going to stick with our stage names just because it's so much easier to do that when you're doing this kind of thing. So Steve is Flint. I'm Max. Of course, you know that. And today we're going to start with talking about the things that I sucked at last week. Starting with I left the title at the beginning of last week's Wrestle Rock Talk, and we didn't introduce it as Wrestle Rock Talk.
No,
We
we didn't.
finally have actually got that dialed in. The name of the show is Wrestle Rock Talk. There won't be. I will check the graphics. The reason I'll give you a quick explanation why that happened. I edit linearly as I start to put this together. So when I was going from the beginning and then it was fine. And then I must have done something in the course of editing, and by the time I got done, it was like 5:30 in the morning. Then I started to upload it, and it took 3.5 hours to upload this. So that's the first thing. We're gonna make some mistakes. It's okay. That's just the nature of the beast. And then the second thing is we were
Yep.
talking about. You had something to say? Sorry.
No, I'm just agreeing.
Yeah, that's just the nature
So
of the
so the
beast.
title just said a title goes here or
Yeah,
something.
right. and honestly, I didn't think I needed to look at it because I'd already looked at it like 20
Of
times.
course.
And so I think what happened is at the end, I something flipped out of the timeline. I could never find it. Well, it ended up at the very beginning of the timeline.
Mm.
That title did, and so that's why that was there. And I didn't notice it until after I got it uploaded to YouTube, and it took 3 hours to upload 50 minutes to YouTube. So I didn't even go check it. And great lesson learned. I need to make sure every time I go through this, I'll peruse this. So the other thing is just a quick note. Steve and I were talking about Boston and side one of Boston. And the first song is Long Time. The second song
The
is
first song is More Than a
More
Feeling.
Than a Feeling. Sure, sorry, I was going to do it again. And then whatever the second song
I think
is
it's Peace of Mind
Peace of
or
Mind. I think you're right. And
yeah,
then the third song is Foreplay and
long.
Long Time.
Yep.
And to me, I looked at that, and the more we talked about it, and then I went and saw it on the album cover. It's funny because it feels like it should be reversed almost. Because Foreplay seems to be a song you would put at the beginning.
Hmm.
You know what I mean? That's
Yeah.
why I think we were both struggling with it so much because Foreplay and Long Time, I always felt that was the energy of the album, but obviously More Than a Feeling was such a massive hit,
Oh, what? Yeah,
right?
100%.
And Long Time had that great acoustic break in it. And for some reason, I thought that acoustic break thing in Long Time was on the first song, but it wasn't. I was wrong. Forgive me. That doesn't mean we didn't both love Boston as one of our great albums. So anyway, those are just things. We'll do that every time. If we make a mistake, we're not afraid to say, hey,
Yeah, it's okay.
this isn't rocket science. It's rock and roll. And we had a great time last week. Boy, we were long-winded, but I think we had
100% long-winded. Yeah,
yeah,
we'll try to be a little shorter
yeah.
and
We
more
will we
concise
will
as
be
we go along.
right. So what we're going to do is every week we're going to talk about we have kind of a list, and that list is going to just continue. It's funny all the way
Evolve.
down,
It's going to evolve.
all
To
the
change.
all the way down here. I'm going. Oh, I got to add this to the list. Oh, I got to add
As we
this.
said last week, I said to Max one time, "Hey, what's your favorite album?" Started listing them, and then next time we talk, you go, "Hey, I forgot to put this guy on, and I forgot to
Right.
put that one. Oh, we need to switch these around." And then you said something to me last week, which I had to throw something on there that
You forgot
I'd
about.
forgotten about.
Right.
So
And on my way here, just a quick example. On my way here, I was listening to Linkin Park, and for me, Linkin Park is a very huge album in my life. The Hybrid Theory, because it really ushered in a whole new new era of rock and roll, and that goes for Stone Temple Pilots and Alice in Chains. So we'll talk about all those as we
Okay.
get down the road. I
Sure.
know that you have other albums too that you're gonna, the more modern albums, and most of the stuff that I'm talking about is from late or very early 70s. It's not, there's a few 60s things in there, but the 60s, the things that I grew up loving were actually early 70s stuff. I think was the case for you as
Yeah,
well.
yeah. I graduated from high school in '75, so I was totally
Right,
totally into the '70s were
right.
definitely my era,
Because you're
musical era.
and you're actually 7 years older than me, so
Okay.
right, or
I know.
5 years. When were you born?
1957.
Yeah, so no, you're only 4 years older than me.
Okay.
I thought it was, for some reason I thought it was 7 years older, but it's not. We're close enough. You would have been, actually, I started young, so you would have been a senior when I was a sophomore in high school. We didn't go the same. I just mean
Right.
relatively.
Hmm.
So today we're gonna just talk about our second album that we, and this one for me, Kiss. Last week I said Kiss. Kiss was really the first album that had the most severe impact on me. Um, your first album was Boston, which is why we talked so much about Boston
Yeah.
last week.
Well, because you're definitely a fan, and that's still
Oh, huge fan.
that's in your
Absolutely.
top
Yeah.
20 at
We
least.
let's just, what we can do from now, when we when you say that, you can just stop. It's in your top. That will
Exactly. Exactly.
question mark at that point.
Yeah.
But let's talk about, I want you to start this week. Talk about what was your second favorite album, Steve?
Uh, at the moment, and I was thinking about this, thinking before I listened to Boston, I listened to some other things, and they were my favorite. But
Mm-hmm.
but at this moment in time, my second favorite album would be the Doobie Brothers, "What Were Once Vices Are Now Habits." And even though the hits that I love on the one previous to that, Captain and Me, had China Grove and Long Train Running and South City Midnight Lady, and which I love too, and that album's, gosh, they're almost like neck and neck in some ways, but I had What Were Once Vices Are Now Habits and listened to it constantly, and just fell in love with it. And I think the thing that I love the most about some of those Doobie Brothers albums is the interplay of all of these different, well, and so a lot of the music that we listen, that you and I like, not all of it, some of it's just straight rock and roll, but there's this interplay. The best example, I think, is actually off the Captain and Me, Long Train Running, where you got the bass doing something. Yeah, I mean, you got this riff, the bass, bum 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 bum, and then you got like a little lead going, and they're all doing some little different thing, but it adds to the whole musical. And What Were Once Vices Are Now Habits, obviously. Um, Black Water does that same thing. There's so many different things, and when the voices come in and they're just doing all these crazy things, and I love that about the Doobie Brothers, and especially kind of the early stuff. I'm not as crazy about the Michael McDonald era, though there are some really great songs that came out of that too. But I really like the earlier Doobie Brothers, and that album especially, just because I had it and played it over and over again.
Do you think that, we'll talk about this a little bit more, and I'll mention, I kind of already told you about this, but this will remind you, but I won't say it now. But I don't know. I didn't read who did. I didn't realize what your first Doobie Brothers album, not the first album you love, but the one that has the hits on it. Because I
Uh,
didn't follow the Doobie Brothers as intensely because they weren't heavy enough for me.
right, they weren't.
And that's
That's
why
true.
I said, like last
And
week,
you
I said
definitely are a heavier guy than I am.
physically and
I just thought that. I guess in two different ways.
metaphorically, physically. Yeah.
I didn't mean that meanly.
No, I know you didn't. I'm the one that brought it up. That's the irony of it all.
Right.
But when you can, if you're going to do something, for me, it's always been, do it large, and that comes easy to me.
Sure.
So, do you think though? I think the word you're looking for is, and what you loved about the Doobies was the syncopation,
Yep.
that the incredible, which is what we love about all music.
Right.
is that you've got all of these things going on that somehow seem to blend, um, and make sense mixed with each other. But if you kind of isolate them on their own, yeah, they're cool. But it's not until you start adding, like let's take Long Train Running. It starts off with dun 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 dun, right?
Yep.
And then the bass comes in with that great little over, right? Yeah, right. It's
Yep.
that syncopation
Yes.
that draws all those together to create one, and then add the drummer.
Well, and your second album that you're
Mm.
going to talk about
Hmm.
does a lot of that as well.
Oh, ridiculous amounts, and
Yes.
are iconic beyond reproach.
Oh, 100%.
So, but one of the things I want to talk about with, that's really important that goes along with syncopation, and most people don't look, they don't even care, even if they know about this. But I told you something about once, Vices. I think that's what we all call that album,
Uh,
Vices.
good
So
enough.
is that what you call it? Do you just call it Vices, or what was once, or do you have you short? Anyway,
Boy, it'd
well,
be nice to shorten it.
yeah,
Yeah.
Vices. One of the great things about Vices, I didn't realize. So I went, as I was putting last week together, I was putting the front and album covers as cutaways into the video, and when I zoomed in to look at the track list, I noticed something that really blew my mind. And it was so amazing. And it's something that it has in common with a whole bunch of the most important albums that are on this list.
Okay.
And that is who produced and engineered it.
Oh,
Do
all
you
right.
remember what I told you last week about it? Does, here, I
I don't
won't.
remember.
So one of the, let me just say this really quickly. Two of the albums you're going to find in my top is Van Halen's first album
Okay.
and a band called Montrose and
Hmm.
their first album. And all three, Vices, uh, Montrose, and Van Halen one, have something in common, very in common. All three of them were produced by a producer named Ted Templeman
Hmm.
and a guy named Don Landy.
Okay.
I believe he's the engineer. And the amazing thing about that is that in film, there's a word called authorship, or it's a French word. And when you study film, it's one of those things they talk about. We all know it. We just don't realize it. You don't name it, but we all know what it is. And that's the commonality that, for example, a great director, oh my goodness,
Director.
a great director brings to the table, and that is the commonality of what he is. For example, Martin Scorsese's got a movie coming out right now. I can't wait to see it. But what does Martin Scorsese? Whenever you don't even have to see his name, you see a piece of a Martin Scorsese film, and you know it's Martin Scorsese.
Okay.
You know what I mean? He partly because every movie he's ever made has De Niro in it, but beyond that, he brings something to the table that you immediately recognize, and that's the authorship of of him. It is the piece of him that he brings to the table. And those great authors like that, that's the part of music that we love and share, even though we don't know it. And that's what
Hmm.
I thought was incredibly interesting is when I saw Ted Templeman and Don Landy's name on the Vices album,
Hmm.
I went, oh my gosh. And I'm sure I didn't even go investigate because I guarantee you I will. There's plenty. For example, Alice Cooper has a great producer. His name was Bob Ezrin, and he produced all of the great Alice Cooper albums. And he has a multitude of other. We'll talk about him later. I don't want to get into that now. But that's the other part of music that we love so much, but we don't realize a lot of times that.
So that in mind, what's your number two album? And we can talk about who engineered that album and what else they engineered. And
Yeah. Well, it's we laughed about it. It's almost beyond an album. is
Oh yeah, it's
Dark Side of the Moon, Pink Floyd.
right.
And it was Alan Parsons
Exactly.
once
And
again,
once again,
another great author behind the scenes. In fact, I've watched a lot of video from some of the greatest producers of all times, and the one thing that they say is they're like in fact, I think it was Bob Ezra. Forgive me, I don't know who said this, but they're like a conductor. And I heard a great conductor say this once, and it's such a beautiful statement. The musicians play and write the music, and the producer plays the band.
hmm,
That's where they're like the fifth member, or however many members of the band there are. They're like the quiet, anonymous guy. A great example is Bob Rock with Metallica and not Def
hmm,
Leppard. Def Leppard was Mutt Lange, but that's the thing that you realize about those guys whenever you watch like the making of, like, for example, Metallica, Some Kind of Monster. It's one of those things that when you see the impact those guys, I mean, they live with them in the studio, and they say things to rock stars that rock stars a lot of times don't want to hear, but in the end they know they're right. Like one time, I remember Butch Vig talking about producing Kurt Cobain, and he was trying to get him to double track his voice, and he couldn't get him to do it. No, I don't need to. I don't need to. And he happened to know that Kurt was a huge John Lennon fan. And so
okay.
one day they were just having a cup of coffee. He said, John Lennon double tracked his voice. And Kurt immediately did it. So that's what I mean. That's what it means to play the band.
Well, it's like the fifth Beatle, right? It was
Absolutely.
George Martin, I believe.
Yep, George Martin.
Okay.
So exactly, George Martin was. That's some fun stories with the Beatles too.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, like they took a $10,000 Neumann microphone, put it in a plastic baggie, and put it inside of a fish tank, and then put the amplifier up against the fish tank and recorded it. And it's used in, I think, Yellow Submarine or someplace. The sound that actually came through the glass caused reverberation inside.
Oh, how
So
funny.
but that's the kind of thing
Sure.
that great producers bring to the table. And so that's such an important part. It's the syncopation of those great instruments, but it's the guy on the other side that's going, hey, what if you did this? Mutt Lange's another classic example. I heard Brian Johnson from AC/DC talking about the impact. And if you don't know, Mutt Lange produced Def Leppard. He produced Hysteria, and then turned around and produced Shania Twain and AC/DC. So this guy, he's that kind of guy. He has that musical instinct and prowess that he hears things the band a lot of times doesn't hear,
Hmm.
and brings that out in them. And those are the commonalities that, in a lot of ways, the irony is sharing that. So, Pink Floyd, Dark Side of the Moon. I
Yeah.
know that's up there for you. I don't know
Oh, yeah.
what
Yeah.
number that. Like I said, how do you even put that in a list? Because
It's
it's so iconic, right?
100%. Yeah. Yeah.
When you heard Vices the very first time, did it immediately attract you?
I don't know that very many albums immediately attract me.
Mm-hmm.
Usually I'll listen to them a few times and I'll really start liking them. Then I'll really, really start liking them. Then sometimes I get tired. and,
And
then,
then you put them
and you put
away,
them away for a while and then you bring them back and go, oh, now I know why I like that so much.
and then all of a sudden you're driving down the road, and you go, "Man, I haven't listened to Dark Side of the Moon in a while."
Exactly.
What about So, what was your favorite song on Vices that you listened to over and over again?
Oh, gosh. I like I really like them all. It wasn't a specific song.
You
I
just when you put it in,
when I put it on,
you just listen to the
I'd
whole
listen to the
thing.
whole thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. So for Dark Side of the Moon, what was your favorite song?
I have to say it was. I liked Time
I was gonna say that.
because in the beginning, Time attracted me immediately.
Mm-hmm.
But then as I grew more musically, I'm no virtue. I can't read music.
Mm-hmm.
I don't understand time signatures and key signatures. I just pick I remember listening to Paul McCartney talk about that. He doesn't read music either, not the way,
Right.
and the way he said it was not like other people do. And that's kind of the way I am. I just play and do things because it feels and sounds right, not because
Sure.
I can see it on a page with notes. Frank Zappa was the opposite of that. If you couldn't play as a virtuoso, he would have nothing to do with you. In fact, Frank Zappa
Mm.
was called the Black Page because his page was just, he
Filled
notated,
with notes.
yeah, he notated everything. So music and that kind of feeling, but Money eventually became my favorite song. And I heard the reason is I heard Roger Waters talking about it on this great. There's a great show called Classic Albums, and if you haven't seen the Dark Side of the Moon classic albums,
I think I did see that
you
one.
owe it to yourself to watch it. Money, I believe, was the first like top 40 single that had a switch between 3/4 time and 4/4 time. In the middle of Money, when it goes into the part we all love, which is that incredible guitar solo in the middle of Money, it switches from 3/4 time to 4/4 time, and then back to 3/4 time. And that just didn't happen, and still doesn't happen.
The other thing about Money and why I think it was resonated,
Mm-hmm.
it's similar to some of those Doobie Brothers songs. It starts off with this slot machine, and
Right,
then the bass comes in and it does something, and then the
right.
guitar comes in, with that vibrato going on, and it's got these different layers that just layer on top of each other, and it just and they did that a lot on that album too. It just makes it great.
Well, and it was from the I didn't really understand concept albums that much until Dark Side of the
Mm.
Moon, and Dark Side of the Moon was is so cohesive from
Yeah.
beginning to end. And then there's really sort of the abomination in all of it, which the first time I heard it, I'm getting goosebumps remembering it because it made no sense, yet I loved it beyond reproach, which was The Great Gig in the Sky, where all of a sudden there's no words. And the most emotional part of that album is this woman,
Female singer.
yeah, that
Oh my
says
gosh.
nothing. And
And it's just so beautiful to listen
oh,
to.
like I
It's
said,
just no, it is.
I'm still goosebumping
Yes.
talking about it because it just made the whole of Dark Side of the Moon made no sense to me because first of all, and then there's one other thing about Dark Side of the Moon that was so amazing. It was terrifying. It has this incredibly terrifying aspect to it. One of my children said to me once, "Yeah, I love Dark Side of the Moon, but I can't like listen to it in the dark or where it's quiet." Because that's what I was going to say. When you think of the Doobie Brothers, you don't think of darkness. You don't
No,
think
no,
of
it's
introspection and the lunatic in the grass. You don't think that, right? But when you listen to the Doobie Brothers, you want to dance and
uh-huh.
it makes you want to move.
Right.
When you listen to Dark Side of the Moon, you feel like you're missing a chemical that you should be taking in order to, and the great thing is you don't need a chemical to listen to Dark Side of the
No,
Moon
it
for it to,
is the chemical
right,
that
and it transports you someplace so amazing
right.
that you can't even describe it. And I think that's why it's lasted and is one of the greatest selling albums of all time, and
Yes.
will continue to be. And I believe uh, it is their Ninth Symphony. And yet they have other
Well,
albums
they've got other albums
that
that
are
are
up there,
really
but
good.
like The Wall and Wish You Were Here And Animals is really great in its own way. It's a different album, and when you realize what Animals is their version of George Orwell, is their
Mm.
version of Animal Farm, and has a powerful statement behind it. Everything Pink Floyd did was based in a sociological mind. And Doobie Brothers, yes, but their songs were made to be 3 or 4 minutes long
Hmm.
and have a hook in them and play on, top 40 radio. Pink Floyd didn't care
No, they
at
didn't.
all. The fact that Money was a hit was probably just a pure
Yeah, oh,
coincidence.
yeah.
It wasn't like they set forth to write, okay, you guys, we're not going to release this album unless you put a top 40 hit on it. I don't think anybody told them that. I
No.
just think it ended up being it. But ironically, like I said before, that song makes no sense being in the top 40 because it changes time signature in the middle of it. And so that's the kind of stuff I love Dark Side of the Moon, but I got to be in a place for that. The
Yeah.
the Doobie Brothers you put in a playlist, and now I can put time, um, I can put time in a playlist, and I love it now. But at the time, ironically, when I would listen to Pink Floyd, I really you really sort of had to concentrate to listen to Pink Floyd.
Sure.
You
Yep.
know,
Yep.
Doobie Brothers, you could be at a party and throw a long train running in, and it was like, you know,
Yeah, you
it,
can listen to it and you can still talk and dance and
right. Have
move
a
and
great.
have a
Pink
great
Floyd's
time.
very
But Pink
tough.
Floyd is like, oh, hold on.
Yeah,
I got to listen to this girl sing.
I got to have a bong,
I've got.
which doesn't fit into your world. I get that, but if you're part of the drug culture, Pink Floyd certainly is up there.
And it probably took me a while to really warm up to Pink Floyd because of that. But now that I have, because I, wasn't in that world,
Right.
I'm still not.
Well,
but that doesn't mean I do not appreciate. I do definitely appreciate Pink Floyd. I think masterpiece,
the
masterpieces.
one of the things I love about that, and if you watch the classic album uh, show, the hour-long special of
Hmm.
them talking about Dark Side of the Moon, is when Dark Side of the Moon came out, the critics were merciless on them. The critics said this album is just out of control, and if you buy their box set, it's so amazing. They put all the critics they put all the critics that wrote horrible stuff about them in it, and it's so funny because after they do that, like they'll put that article, they have that article in there, and then it has how many records it's sold and how much money it's made, and it's just really it's really a cool version. You're kind of playing this in your mind as you're reading this stuff these guys are saying. One of the things was that all of the paraphernalia that came with the album, the that it made it, the poster we were talking about last
Hmm.
week. So yeah,
Okay, so let me throw this out at you,
okay,
uh, and you'll get this. The Wizard of Oz, when it first came out,
I know this.
the critics hated
Hated
it.
it. Yep.
They thought it was terrible. Well, 10 or 15 years later, when the kids who loved it became critics, they loved it. And then you know what the connection between the Wizard of Oz and
Yeah,
Dark
dark
Side of
side.
the
They,
Moon.
they call it the dark side of Oz. And I've heard Waters talk about that, and he says there's absolutely, but once again, the Wizard of Oz happens to be up there in my. If you were going to ask me top movie list, Wizard of Oz is in top three for me because it
Oh,
had
wow.
such a prominent place in my heart, and I know for a fact
Mm.
that Waters and those guys loved it too.
They must have.
So, but here's the
Yeah.
irony of that. Do you think that those things get in your head like that? And they did it almost subconsciously without even recognizing the connection to the Wizard of Oz. Did they even have to? Because the Wizard
Could
of
have
Oz
been.
has such an incredible timing and pace to it. I
Hmm.
mean, you can. It's not like it ever changes. It's always the same. It
Right.
always does the same thing in the exact same spots. So how many of those great movies like that have that authorship
Right.
that happens to be that incredible moment in that sort of the pacing of life that as consumers we've just all become familiar with and acclimated towards. So they don't even
Mm.
it's so deep in our souls, that kind of pacing. A 2 hour
Yeah.
movie, it has everything in it in place so that when the climax happens, the point of no return, and what, it doesn't, that's why the Wizard of Oz never lets you down. Because how many times have you sang if I were a king? Every time you go to those scenes that are so powerful in The Wizard of Oz, you're out of the woods, and they,
You.
I'm a huge fan because I believe, I think I wish I had something, but I'm pretty sure the director, most people don't know this. The guy that directed The Wizard of Oz
Okay.
also directed,
I don't know. I don't know.
probably one of the greatest other movies of all time, which is
Do
and
you want me to guess?
yeah, I do.
Ben-Hur,
That's up
perhaps?
there. No, but it's
I don't know.
I'll give you a clue. Clark Gable,
Oh, Gone with the Wind.
same director.
Really?
Yeah, I think his name's Ian Fleming. He took over because the movie was a disaster. And so when he finished Gone with the Wind, he took over The Wizard of Oz and got it on schedule. And because Ian Fleming, well, he just done Gone with the Wind, which was one of the most massive movies
Well,
of
of
all
course.
time.
Yeah.
And so he's the one that salvaged what was going on with The Wizard of Oz. So once again, authorship.
Right. Right.
I don't know about you, but I love Gone with the Wind. And
Hmm. Yeah.
the power of Gone with the Wind is not just the guys on the screen; it's the guy who directed those people on the screen. Once again, it's the guy who plays the band, mentality. He's the one that played the
Sure.
actor, he's got the performances out of him, and he did the same thing in Wizard of Oz. And that authorship is something we all know and love, which goes right back to Pink Floyd and The Dark Side of Oz. So
Mm.
maybe when I heard Roger Waters talk about the fact that they didn't do that it's just an incredible coincidence.
Uh-huh.
What I always wanted to know was, how did somebody figure that out?
Yeah. Who knows exactly?
And you have to start it right when the lion roars the third time, or
Oh,
it
is that what
doesn't.
it
Yeah,
is?
yeah. So yeah, that when the opening of the MGM logo comes up and the lion. If you don't know what we're talking about, go look it up. If you're most people know about this now. And of course, the album's only 45 minutes long. And
In the
The Wizard of
movies,
Oz
yeah.
is much longer. But the things that happen, when the Great Gig in the Sky starts, when the cabin falls on, or when the house falls on the Wicked Witch of the East, and her
Hmm.
toes curl under, and the Great Gig in the Sky. I think it's when. No, it's not then. It starts before then, and that's when she's in the tornado, I think, or something. Anyway, if
Oh.
you haven't watched, it's been a long time since I watched it, but go watch it. It's an amazing thing.
Yeah.
But maybe that's the part um, that we all share. We just don't realize that. Nobody puts words in.
No, could be. Hey, so we don't make this too long. Let's get on to wrestling. Is
Perfect.
that okay?
Absolutely.
Now, last week you talked about something called the pile driver,
Hmm.
and you showed a picture, and I look at that picture, I'm going, dude, you're gonna break that dude's neck.
Right.
You could kill somebody with that pile driver.
Absolutely. And if you haven't seen Sid Vicious try to do that to Brian Pillman, where he actually tried to hurt him,
Oh my God.
I actually talk about this on the Pain Lair, and I haven't put part two up of the Sid Udi. Um oh, I've done a three-part series about Sid Udi because he's one of those people in the wrestling business that I had a very big problem with.
Okay.
And he intentionally tried to hurt Brian Pillman, and I was accused of that myself. So
Mm.
I understand that I intentionally tried to hurt Brian Knobs. The difference is I didn't try to hurt Brian Knobs. Brian Knobs quit trusting me. Anybody who knows what I did then. But I'm sorry. Continue with your question.
So the question is, and now I know what's called the pile driver. It's when you looks like
You spin a man upside down.
you've got him upside down,
Right.
and you're squatting down with his head down on, you know.
Actually, to do it right, and Taker did the most amazing pile driver in the history. First of all, Taker's 6'9".
Whoa.
So here you got a guy. That's why I said
Hmm.
last week. Here you got a guy that's 6'9", and the dude he would jump in the air with the dude, and
Really?
then from the air you pull your legs up underneath you and you land on your knees with the goal. I mean, the obvious thing would be that you're trying to compress his spine and kill him. Well, we
Right.
all know that if you did that to somebody in real life, you would destroy them.
Right.
If you actually gave somebody a pile driver and intentionally tried to hurt them, you
It
would maim them at the minimum,
paralyze.
paralyze them, cause a concussion, crush their skull.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean,
Could cause death.
absolutely, it could be a deadly move.
So the question I've got is, how how did you and other wrestlers do that safely to not hurt the other person?
That's this is what I want to talk about every week, because this is what makes wrestling so interesting, in my opinion. We all when we watch wrestling, one of the things that the movie industry counts on is it's a very common phrase. If you don't know it, it's okay. You know it, you just don't realize it.
Right.
What do you do when you go to a movie? You buy some popcorn. Popcorn. I'm really struggling with my verbiage today. You buy some popcorn. You buy a beverage. You go in. You sit down. It's light in the theater. You put your drinks down, and now you watch all the commercials they run before the movie. Before what happens? The lights go out. And what do you do when the lights go out and the movie starts? It's called willing suspense of disbelief.
Mm, yes.
So you sit there, and as soon as the let's use the Wizard of Oz, the MGM logo comes up and the lion
Hmm.
roars, you put your hands on your seat and you look at the screen and you go, okay, I'm yours for 2 hours. I'm
Right.
going to believe anything you put in front of me.
Kansas really is all black and white.
Yeah, it really, well, you bought it, right? I mean,
Exactly.
the beauty of what he did was to create that using something as simple as changing the film from black and white to color. It transported you immediately. And after that, nobody else could do it. And could there have been a more iconic movie to usher
Mm,
us into that age,
right.
as it did Gone with the Wind?
Sure.
Those movies are so associated with that era of Hollywood where Hollywood had to change from black and white. And what better movie than The Wizard of Oz to usher that feeling to you in? And that willing suspense of disbelief is what makes you walk out of the theater going, "Oh my gosh, how amazing is that?" The guy that trained me his name was Red Bastine. And one of the things he taught me, and I didn't quite understand it in the beginning. In fact, I didn't really understand it at all. Is he one of the stories he told me was how much money wrestling made during the Depression.
Mm,
And I thought to myself, people are poor, yet they go see a wrestling match. People are poor, but they go see a movie.
hmm.
Why? Why do you
Well,
go?
one thing is they had nothing else to do because they didn't have a job, but
Yeah, but it still
but
was a nickel or a quarter to
I
go.
know they still had to
That
find
that
some
was
money.
that was a loaf of bread and a pound of
I
hamburger
know.
in
I
1928,
That's
right?
true.
So here these people are spending money during the Great Depression to go to see wrestling. And the reason they did is because when we listen to music, when we are entertained, when you suspend your disbelief, when you're watching a great movie, you're not thinking about your taxes. You're
Right.
not thinking about, your financial situation. If it's a good movie, I mean,
Right.
if it's what was that one that Ben Affleck and Jennifer Lopez, Gile, that like didn't sell 3 tickets, I think. But
I don't
if it's a
remember.
horrible movie, it's easy to drift off and think about something else. But if you're watching The Wizard of Oz, you ain't thinking about nothing but Oz, and
And if you're watching wrestling,
you're sucked
you're
in.
sucked in.
Right.
What's going to happen next?
What's going
What
to
are they
happen
going to,
next? Right.
is this guy going to hurt this other guy? Are they going to, who's going to win? Is it the good guy, the bad guy, or is it my team or your team?
To understand this, you really have to go to some fundamentals of professional wrestling. And I'm going to take you um, to sort of the origin of wrestling. And it's certainly not modern, okay?
Mm-hmm.
The wrestling started, you have to think about how wrestling started. And it started with the producers. It was the producers that did this.
Okay.
Wrestling was used to travel with the carnivals and the circus. You always
Oh,
associate that with them, right?
okay. Yeah.
And here's how it worked. Now, Red told me the stories of what it was like in modern America and the way they used it in modern America. Actually, there's even a great, I think it's Bonanza or um, it might be Gunsmoke, where they actually follow the storyline I'm about to tell you. And this was what Red was telling me happened in the Depression. Okay. So you have this guy who has this monster who he's traveling the country with. And the guy would roll into town. They'd find the biggest bar in town, the most popular bar in town. And he and the guy would walk into town, go in and sit down and have a drink. And at first, people would notice him because the guy he was with was a monster. Imagine, let's just, to give you the visualizations you're trying to secure here, let's use Andre the Giant.
Okay.
You got a guy, forgive me, a smaller statured guy
Mm-hmm.
walks in with Andre the Giant. It's like you and I going
Right,
someplace, right?
exactly.
It's
Yeah.
that same mentality. So we go into a bar together. We start having a few drinks, and everybody's laughing and go, "Gosh, this guy's a monster." And he says, "I'll tell you what, Andre can beat the hell out of any guy in this town." Oh, no way. He can't beat old Joe Brown. Well, why don't we have a wrestling match and just find out whether that's the case or not? And who in that town wouldn't go, "Oh, man, you go get Joe and he'll kill Andre. He's as big as Andre and everybody knows he can throw 3 bales of hay at once. Are you out of your mind?" So they would go. So now the promoter starts to play the town.
Sure.
See? So, but here's what makes it interesting. This is how wrestling works. And all of a sudden, just like movies, just like everything else, it will make sense to you. So now the frenzy of these two finally meeting at the rodeo hall or the
The big top
armory,
or
wherever it is,
whatever
right?
it is, they're
They've now
putting on their
challenged
show.
Joe Brown to come and wrestle Andre the Giant. And the match is about to begin. And the promoter that brought Andre to town goes into Joe's tent. And especially in the Depression, it doesn't
Mm-hmm.
matter. That you have to remember what I'm talking about is as old. This scenario is as old as civilization, and we'll talk about this more. I won't go into it today, but I believe with all of my heart that we'll talk about the Colosseum in ancient Roman times. It's the same mentality. I'm telling you right now. I saw a thing about a female gladiator, and I know damn good and well it was a work, which is what I'm about to explain to you. This is the most important part of what I'm telling you right now.
Okay.
So the promoter would go into the tent where Joe was, the green room or whatever,
Right.
warm up area. He'd
His
kick everybody out of the room, and he'd look at Joe and he'd go, Joe, we could go out there tonight and whoever the best man is wins. That could happen. But what if I could promise you another 4 paydays? And Joe would go, what do you mean? And he'd say, well, what if you go out there tonight and you lose because you got cheated? No way, I'm not doing that. Are you out of your mind? I'm going to guarantee you another $200 for 4 more times. This is in the Depression.
Right.
Doesn't matter whether it's the Depression. Pick your amount of money. Pick your era. The Romans, the Greeks, the Germans. It doesn't matter. In fact, the Greek society is, Plato predicted that the professionalism of athletics would eventually cause the fall of the Greek Empire. And there's some incredible suggestions that's exactly what happened.
Okay.
Because athletes quit being well-rounded, which fell away from all of their traditions. Is what it meant to be a great athlete. Athletes were supposed to be as smart artistically as they were athletically. But imagine now you got Joe there, and Joe's poor as a dirt mouse, and all of a sudden, for the next 4 months, he's going to make $800. And the way he did it was, and so when Joe finally listened to the way he was going to lose, there's no disgrace because we all know wrestling. And what would happen for Joe to lose? While the ref's back was turned, the manager would throw a roll of quarters or some brass knuckles into the ring. And while the ref wasn't looking, hit Joe. Joe goes down, loses. And generally speaking, Andre and the promoter were ushered out of town by the police because the town was so mad that he'd lost,
right,
that they were just madder than mad could be, and they would usher the guy out of town, and the promoter would play the entire town. He'd pay for the police force to make sure they were taken care of leaving out of town. And the cops would want to arrest him. He said, "Don't worry, I'll give you another chance. I'll give Joe another chance to beat Andre." So the whole setup was designed to ensure a rematch.
right,
That's how wrestling works. And if you really hurt the guy, if you really hit him with the brass knuckles, well, he's going to have a broken jaw or he's going to die. So Andre can't really kill Joe because he's got to come back and give Joe a chance to make his money.
right,
The promoter wants to come back because what did he just do? He just sold out the town and made $4,000 or $5,000 that he's got in his pocket. So he's more than willing to come back to the town and get. In fact, he loves Joe because he just made a whole bunch of money. Joe loves the promoter, and the town hates the promoter and Andre so bad they're willing to come and pay again to watch this whole thing go down.
right.
So now you can easily plug that in. So when you watch wrestling,
Uh-huh.
you have to remember, like a pile driver, wrestling is like live stunt work. And I believe there's a new progression, even by today's standards. I don't think wrestling has gone to where it is capable of going yet. I really believe that wrestling has another level it hasn't even begun to ascend to. And I'll talk about that in the future. I don't want to start that conversation now. So how do I answer back to your question?
Right.
How do you do that and not hurt the guy? And the answer is, and why wrestling is so hard, and why all the guys you look at that are old, like Hogan, I watched him on Joe Rogan the other day. He's had I showed you the pictures. He's 6 feet in the air dropping a leg on a guy.
Mm-hmm.
The reason is because he has to burden the impact. He has to take the impact. So not only him, but the guy he's protecting
Right.
can live to wrestle tomorrow night. That's why wrestling has to be in that in that moment. Is it choreography? Well, yes and no. Um, it's probably more akin to live stunt work. How do you do this? The art of wrestling that people don't appreciate, which is part of what I want to suggest to the world can change, and sort of my vision of wrestling in the future is that's the art of wrestling that doesn't get the appreciation it deserves. And I intend on explaining that to you. And if you have any questions about any of this, come and join us. Eventually, we're going to do this live so that people can actually ask us questions on the spot.
You can
And
ask you questions.
well, but you're here with me and you ask great questions. To me, this is the perfect, great question. How do you do a pile driver and not kill the guy? That's really not the question. I know that sounds ridiculous. It's it's as inherent as the fundamentals of any athletic endeavor or any entertainment endeavor. It's so ingrained in what wrestling is. In fact, wrestling is because of that you're willing to suspend your disbelief because these guys have to be able to work tomorrow. And we all know how many real pile drivers are you going to take before you're done with the wrestling business?
Yeah.
How many leg drops are you going to take? How many guillotines are you going to take? How many arm bars you're going to take? How many punches to the face? How many headbutts? You know, one of the things Red Bastien used to tell me is he said, if you're going to headbutt somebody, I'm sorry, you better sell that yourself as well. Because if you headbutt somebody, and I've done it accidentally or in a
Mm-hmm.
bar when somebody really was out of hand and out of control, when you headbutt somebody, it hurts you as much as it does them.
I'll bet it does.
Actually, that's probably not the case because when you headbutt somebody, you're trying to get your forehead to go across the bridge of their nose and break their nose and do a different kind of damage. But how many of those are you going to take and then you're never going to wrestle again?
Right.
That's the part of wrestling that you have to remember, and you have to use the phrase willing suspense of disbelief. Because when you go to a wrestling match, that's the question everybody always asks. Like, come on, tell me. Well, we all know it's all exposed now, but they still don't talk about intensely. Wrestling is very guarded, almost like magic,
Mm.
is very guarded about the protection of the other guy and the magic, if you will, of how you do that and not hurt somebody. Well, television makes it easy because television you can cut away when the punch is thrown, so you don't actually see the impact. They cut away. The only time they show you replays is when they can hide the angle that hides how you're protecting the guy.
Right.
And that's fine because that's what it is. It's live stunt work is exactly what it is. It's like watching a however long the match is, 20-minute live exhibition of incredible stunt work.
That's awesome.
So we'll end there this
Yes.
week on Wrestle Rock Talk. Wrestle Rock Talk. I love that name.
Yeah, it's great.
Steve actually thought of that. We thought of Wrestle
You can
Rock.
call me Flint, though.
Oh, that's oh, we'll get it. So Flint is one of those cats that he and I got it. He got what I did, and I got what he did from the very beginning, and that's why we're doing this show together. And I love it, and I'm pretty sure he does. Go check out all the things we talked about today. It's all there. Producers and engineers are hugely important in music. They bring a commonality to the artists they represent, and you can usually see it. So there's lots of fun research. I'll put in the cutaways, a bunch of information about the people I talked about, so you can easily access them and see their names, and then you can go find out for yourself who they are. Mutt Lange, Butch Vig, list goes on.
Sure.
And so until the next time on Wrestle Rock Talk, I'm Max Payne.
I'm Flint.
We'll see you then.